Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had a good lunch break, and generally, depending on where you are, hour and a half. If an hour is not long enough, I've been stationed here in Conway several times. In fact, lived here for 6 months in 1995. But I assume it gives you enough time to get something to eat. But if you need longer, just don't hesitate to let us know, and I'll be happy to accommodate that. But thank you very much. We're ready to continue. Please give your attention now to the next witness. Lister, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. This time the state calls Dennis Hart Sr.
Okay.
Wait right here for me. Please raise your right hand, place your left hand on the Bible. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that evidence you're about to give the court in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Please proceed with your step. Just come up, speak up, microphone, state your full name, and spell your last name.
Dennis Hart, H-A-R-T.
Mr. Hart, if you don't mind, tell this jury where you currently live.
Myrtle Beach.
Okay, and how long have you been in Horry County?
About 10, 11 years.
Okay, and are you currently married and got any kids?
Married with 3 kids.
Okay, and how old are your kids now?
23, and 17, and 18.
Okay, so lucky for you, they're kind of grown, take care of themselves for the most part.
Yes.
Okay, and where are you currently working?
Harry's Breakfast and Pancakes.
Okay, and where were you working back in 2013?
Tilted Kill.
And about how long had you worked at Tilted Kill?
A little over 3 years.
Okay, and if you don't mind, tell this crowd, what was your job responsibility?
I was a kitchen manager. Opened a restaurant in the morning, set bars, get bread ready.
Okay, and earlier we had Jessica Cook and Jody Davenport testify. Did you know those ladies?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you work with them?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and did you work with Heather Elvis?
Yes, ma'am.
And about how long had Heather worked there at the Tilted Kill?
3 years, a little over 3 years.
Okay, and how about Sidney Moore? Did he work at the Tilted Kill?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and how did you know Sidney?
I met Sidney when I worked at Red Robin. He was maintenance man there periodically, and I remembered him from then. And when I got the kitchen manager job, I needed some maintenance work done, and I remembered him. He had good, reviews and everything, professional. So I brought him in to help me out at Tilted Kill. to do
Okay,
maintenance.
what did he do as far, okay, so just general maintenance?
Maintenance, plumbing, any repairs, small repairs I needed that he was able to do.
Okay, and about, what were his hours at Tilted Kill? Did he normally work during the day or the night?
For the most part, it was in the evening. Every now and then there'd be something you could do, real quick, so it was done while we were open. But for the most part, it was after.
Okay. And when you worked at the Tilted Kill, do you have any knowledge of the relationship between Heather and the defendant?
Yes.
And what was that relationship?
It was that they were seeing each other and they were having sex on the back patio after hours.
Okay. And did you ever ask Sidney about it or have any kind of conversation with him?
Yes, I confronted Sidney about having sex with one of my servers on the back patio and informed him that is not why I hired him. I hired him to be my maintenance man and not sleep with my servers.
Okay. And did he, what did he say back?
Well, I asked him how come you did it, and he said it's because it was there.
Okay. Now, when you were there at Tilted Kill working, did you ever have any kind of relationship other than friendship with Heather Elvis?
No.
Did you know her to have any kind of relationship with any other male employee at the Tilted Kill?
No.
Okay. Now, did you ever see Sidney come up during the daytime and see her and visit?
Yeah, he'd bring her Starbucks Danish while she was working.
Okay. And with their relationship at the Tilted Kill, was that a big secret or was it everybody knew about it? What was the status?
No, they were pretty open about it and didn't really try. Once it was out, they were open about it.
Okay. And it was not unusual to see him come up and visit her during the day?
No.
And when we say come up and visit during the day, he wasn't working, just solely to see her?
Yeah, he would just pop up with, coffee or Danish for me.
Okay. Now, if you don't mind, where did you live? And you don't have to give me the exact address, I understand, but in 2013, what area did you live in?
The Forest Brook area.
Okay. In Horry County?
Yes.
Okay. And what was your phone number?
843-274-2208.
All right, if you don't mind, we're gonna put it on this board. Everybody's gonna be able to remember that probably
It's fine.
5 minutes from here. Can you give it to us? Look, we couldn't remember 30 seconds.
843-274-2208.
Thank you. And that was the phone number you had in December of 2013. And was that the only phone number you had?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the early morning of December 18th and the night of December 17th, when Heather went missing, did you talk with her at all during that time frame?
No.
Okay. And when was the last time you saw her?
Probably her last shift,
Okay.
if I worked with her there. I mean, it's the only time I saw her was at the restaurant. Never saw her outside of work, except for one time we went to a baseball game, and it was a reward for employees that had done a good job, and like 10 of us went to that. But other than that, it was always at work.
Okay, so y'all weren't even friends outside of work, really?
No.
Okay. Now, let me ask you something. Do you know about when Heather and the defendant's relationship broke up?
It was around holidays.
Okay. And after they broke up, did Heather continue to work at the Tilted Kill?
Yes.
Did Sidney continue to work at the Tilted Kill?
There was an abrupt end to Sidney working there. I called him one day to see if he could do some repair work for me. And I called, he answered the phone, I asked if he was tied up, and he said, "What do you mean by that?" And I said, "Just need, are you available?" And then the conversation went into Heather Elvis and how she was a bitch and a slut and spreading rumors about their family.
Let me ask you, how long did that conversation last?
Maybe a minute and a half, maybe, I'm not sure.
Okay. And to your knowledge, did he know about the rumors that she was pregnant?
I mean, yes,
Okay.
yes, because it was mentioned that she was spreading rumors that she was pregnant and trying to ruin their family.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. Did you hear about these rumors when you worked at Tilted Kill that she may be pregnant?
Yes.
And was that rumor ever resolved before she went missing, one way or the other?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Let me ask you something. The phone number that you called him at, was that the phone number you always used?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, was that the only phone number he had?
Yes.
Okay. And you had known him for some time, even before Tilted Kill?
Yes.
Okay, and you had had many conversations with him?
And just off and on, I talked to him while he was doing work. I mean, I was just,
But you recognized his voice?
yes.
Okay, so, and when you called, Sidney picked up?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you were saying some things were said on this conversation. And I want to be clear for everybody. Who always owned that phone call?
It was Sidney and his wife, Tammy.
Okay. So both of them were on the phone talking to
Yes,
you?
it was on speakerphone.
Okay. But when you first called, he clearly picked up?
Yes.
Okay, and that was the number you always call him on?
Yes.
Okay, so clearly he could pick up the phone at that time?
Yes.
And during the conversation, she also got on the phone?
Yes.
Okay. During that conversation, you can't tell me what Tammy said, But did Sidney ever tell Tammy to be quiet or get off the phone or anything like that?
No.
So it was clear both of them were on the phone together talking with you?
Yes.
Okay. And he never hung the phone up early to end the conversation?
No.
Okay. And he never told her to get off the phone?
No.
So it was really both of them talking to you?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. When you worked there, what kind of employee was Heather?
She always showed up. I mean, she was always there to do her job. If she was going to be late, she'd text.
Okay.
So, I mean, she was responsible.
Had there ever been a time prior to this time when she just didn't show up for work and nobody knew anything and she didn't call in?
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay. Now, when did you hear that she was missing? When was the first time you heard that?
It was on the news.
Okay.
So that they were filing a missing persons report.
Once you had that knowledge, what did you do?
The next morning, I went to work and I opened a restaurant and I waited till Jessica Cook got there and I called Sidney.
And when you called Sidney, tell me about that conversation.
I called Sidney and asked him if he had heard from Heather, seen Heather, or knew where Heather was because we couldn't find her and everybody was looking for her and we were worried about her.
And what did he say?
He said no, he hadn't seen her since their family vacation to Disneyland. But at that time, there were so many rumors still going around about their relationship, it was kind of hard to believe that he hadn't seen her.
Okay. Let me ask you something. Other than Sidney, did you reach out to any other men asking, hey, did you know where Heather might be?
No.
And how long had you known Sidney?
Known of Sidney probably 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
Because I worked at Red Robin for about 5 years, till 3, so maybe a little bit longer.
Okay, and you knew her for at least a year?
Yes.
And you were familiar with the relationship?
Yes.
Okay. And after she went missing, he was the only one you reached out to?
This is the only one I could think of to contact.
No further questions for this witness, Your Honor.
Cross-examine.
And I'm going to move this vote in the new one.
Good morning,
Good morning.
or good afternoon, I guess at this point. You testified that you knew Sidney for, I guess, a number of years prior to Miss Elvis going missing, is that right?
Yes.
All right. Now, you worked with Miss Elvis while she was at the Tilted Kills, correct?
Yes.
Were you and her personal friends? Did y'all spend a lot of time together?
No.
You didn't? So safe to say any of the various aspects of her personal life you would not have been privy to one way or another, correct?
The only thing I was privy to when we went to the baseball game was 10 people. We ended up outside on the balcony smoking, and she was talking to me about issues that she was having in her personal life, having to live in her car periodically because she was fighting with her parents.
Okay. Other than that incident, were there many other occasions where you and her did just that? You know, go out and drinking?
That was the only time.
Okay, all right. Now, on this one occasion where you did have the opportunity to talk to her about what was going on, you said she had some various things going on in her personal life. Were those struggles or problems separate and aside from any breakup with Sidney?
I'm not sure.
Okay, you mentioned that she was living in her car. It was something she expressed.
She said periodically she
Your Honor, I'm
was.
going to object at this time. At this time, I
This
think
is not your witness. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
What's the basis of objection?
At this time, we're going to object to the relevancy.
Restate your question. Rephrase your question.
Mr. Hart, did she express to you various struggles she was having in her personal life during this time period?
Your Honor, at this time, I'm objecting to hearsay.
Well, he asked, did she express any concerns at that time? I'll allow that question, but not no answer as to what.
I'm just not sure what time you're implying to, because the only time she expressed that to me was at the ballpark,
And that's,
at that outing.
I tell you, let me ask you this, do you know about when that outing was?
I want to say it's in baseball season, obviously.
Late summer?
October maybe.
Okay, so early fall, safe to say?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. And to your knowledge, was Heather and Sidney separated at that time? Had their relationship ended?
I'm not sure.
Okay. And what were the various struggles that she was having in her personal life that you?
Just disagreements with her parents. I mean, she was a young girl that went back and forth. Her parents wanted to do stuff and they'd argue, and she'd end up just going with a friend or staying in the car, kind of thing. That's the gist I got from the conversation.
Okay, all right. Let me ask you this. You have a son that used to work at Tilt-A-Kilt there with you for a period of time, didn't you? And he goes by, is it just Junior or Dennis Hart?
No, he goes by Dennis Hart.
He goes by Dennis Hart, okay. Now, at what point did he go and move to Washington State, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, you remember about when that would have been?
It was before the holidays, so before October. The holidays for me are like Halloween, and New Year's.
All right, so he had recently relocated, is that safe to say?
So he went back to do with his mom. He lived there. He came here to live with me for a while and was having, getting homesick and decided he wanted to go back.
Okay. Now, before he left, was he and Heather close, just from a relationship standpoint?
They would text back and forth. They had a friendly relationship. I'm not sure how far that relationship went
Okay.
because I gave my son privacy and I didn't pry. I figured if he wanted to tell me, he could tell me.
Sure, I understand. But let me ask you this, do you know if they continued any kind of communication through text or Snapchat or any other communication platform after he went back to Washington?
I'm not sure. I don't have access to his phone.
Well, and I understand that. This case has been, let me withdraw that. You were first interviewed about this case back in late 2013, correct? Is that correct?
I'm sure if that's what it was.
All right. We're now in 2019, and you've had to give testimony or at least provide a statement in this case multiple times, correct?
Yes.
You've had to speak to investigators over the course of the last 6 years, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Having had to do all that, have you ever had occasion to ask your son as to whether or not he was communicating with her at all in late 2013?
The only thing I asked my son is if he had a relationship with her, and he said they never had sex.
Okay.
But he had talked to her, they've been talking kind of like that, but never, I guess, consummated the relationship.
And I'm not necessarily implying a sexual relationship. What I'm looking to do is, to your knowledge, did they ever have any communications or discussions regarding?
I just want to object as to the relevancy of whatever relationship his son had with the victim.
Let's start again. So, to the best of your knowledge, if you have any knowledge, were there ever any conversations between your son and Miss Elvis relating to maybe Miss Elvis going to visiting him or him coming here to see her at some point in 2013?
Again, sir, you'd have to ask him.
Okay. So you don't have any personal
I
knowledge?
do not.
Okay. Let me ask you this. When the police first came to speak to you, I believe it was on the 18th of December, the day or so after she went missing, did you indicate to police or give the police your son's name as somebody that maybe had some recent communications with them?
I may have, I don't remember right off the bat. I know I mentioned Sidney Moore,
Okay.
that they might want to speak to him because he was having a relationship with Heather. But I don't think I told them they need to go talk to my son.
Okay. Well, and what I'm saying is, knowing that she was missing and knowing that they had been close and knowing that they had some degree of communication after he moved back to Washington, did you think to call your son at that point or give police your son's number as somebody that they may want to see if he had heard from her?
It was a couple days after all this started before I even contacted my son. That way I knew more of what was going on because I didn't want to upset him, before with no information to give him.
And again, during the observations you had with Sidney and Miss Elvis, there was never any violence indicated, is that correct?
No, not to my knowledge.
You never observed any sort of jealousy or possessiveness by Mr. Moore?
No.
Correct. And Mrs. Moore never came into the restaurant, correct?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, you're not aware of any overt threats that came in through the restaurant, either directed to Miss Elvis or to anybody else in the restaurant?
Only the rumors I heard.
All right, and those are rumors, correct?
Yes.
One moment, John.
Certainly.
No further questions?
Well, redirect, so
Just a couple questions.
sure.
Mr. Hart, Mr. Bouchette asked you some questions on your son, about your son. Do you remember that with this jury?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I think it kind of got lost in the question, so I want to make sure I'm clear and these people over here are clear. Where did your son live in December of 2013?
Washington State.
So it was not even in Orange County?
Correct.
Okay. Now, did you ever have any kind of relationship with him?
No.
Okay. And this is your phone number, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, are we going to see this phone number on her phone records for December 18th when she went missing?
No.
Are we going to see it for December 17th?
No.
You said, or Mr. Bouchette asked you a few questions about how things went at Tilted Kill and the relationship between her and Sidney. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And was she afraid of Sidney Moore?
No.
Was she afraid of his wife?
Yes.
No further questions.
Recross. All right, thank you. Wish Mr. Hart be excused, solicitor.
Yes, Your Honor, please.
Any objection? No. You all free to leave, sir.
Thank you.
Call your next witness, please.
Thank you. This time the state calls Ronald Whitt. Thank you, Mr. Hart. Appreciate it.
Please raise your right hand, place your left hand on the Bible. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give the court in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Sure, take your time. Judge Williams.
Please state your full name and spell your last name.
Ronald Whitt, W-I-T-T.
Mr. Whitt, tell this jury where you're currently employed.
I work for T-Mobile.
And how long have you worked for T-Mobile?
I'm in my 15th year.
Wow. And what do you do for T-Mobile?
I work in what's known as the Law Enforcement Relations Group. In our group, it's primarily production of records. When we receive an appropriate legal demand, we also provide assistance on a 24/7 basis to 911 and law enforcement for emergencies involving cell phones. And then as a testifier, I appear in court to verify and attest to T-Mobile records.
Okay, and just so we're clear, when you mean T-Mobile, you mean the cell phone provider?
Yes,
Okay, and are you able to look at and identify T-Mobile records?
yes,
And can you tell this crowd here if it's a T-Mobile record and whether or not they're accurate?
yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked States Exhibit 3 and 4. Would you look at these items and tell me if you can identify them?
Okay.
What are those items?
3 is a printed copy of cell phone records that we provided previously in response to a legal demand. And Exhibit 4 is a CD which contains electronic version of the printed copy.
Okay, and have those records been tampered with in any form or fashion?
It does not appear to be.
And if you don't mind, tell this court what phone number those records are for.
From 843-997-8152.
Okay. And those records, if you don't mind, tell them so we know what, time span do we have the records from?
The records start on the 17th of July, 2013, and go up and include the 18th of December, 2013.
Okay. Your Honor, this time the state wishes to put in Exhibits 3 and 4 into evidence and publish them to the jury.
Any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, States 3 and 4, admitted you may publish.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Whitt, I'm going to put these right here for now. And I'm going to show you 2 more exhibits I've already showed the defense attorney. They are marked 5 and 6. Do you recognize this? And do you recognize number 6?
Yes.
Okay, and tell this court what they are.
They are extracts from the complete copy, the electronic version, the printed copy, extract for certain time frames of the same records, and with some columns redacted, and just, in one case, an extra column put in to adjust the time to Eastern time.
Okay, and are these accurate as to the phone records right off the record and as to the conversion when you convert the text from Pacific time to Eastern time?
Yes.
Your Honor, this time the state wishes to put 5 and 6 into evidence and publish them to the jury.
Right, 5 is the exact replication.
5 is the converted one and 6 is the exact
All right, so
record.
5 is the converted one and 6 is the exact replication.
Yes, sir.
Without any objection to publishing and admitting those, Mr. Sullivan. Thank you. They are admitted and you may publish.
Now, Mr. Whitt, before we publish these, I would like for you to explain to this jury, T-Mobile records. What time zone are the phone calls kept in?
For the records from this time frame, there's 2 data points on the record. You have voice calls, and you'll also see entries for text messages. The voice calls are in what's known as local time, where the caller is physically located when they're making and receiving the calls. The text messages are in Pacific time.
Okay.
So to adjust to Eastern time, you have to add 3 hours for the time shown on the records.
Okay, so when I look at these records from December 2013, and this phone was in Horry County, the records would show the phone calls in Eastern time,
Correct.
okay? But the text messages would be in Pacific time.
Correct.
So when you look at the record, to really know what's going on on the phone in Horry County, you have to convert the text messages from Pacific time to Eastern time.
Yes.
And that's what we've done on this board.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you don't mind, you mind stepping down just for a minute so we can go through this? Yeah, okay. put both of them up here. Now, it's already come in through evidence that this phone number belonged to Heather Elvis. Now, I want to show you, this is how they're going to view it on the phone records, is that correct?
Yes.
But in actuality, when you convert the text messages, this is how they roll in on the phone in Horry County.
Well, this is how it will be on the records, and then for the text messages, this will be the correct time on the converted column for the text messages.
Okay, and have you reviewed these records extensively?
Yes.
Tell this jury when the last phone call was made on Heather's records.
The last is on the 18th of December at 3:41 a.m.
Okay. Now, sometimes with phone records, does that just mean she didn't use the phone anymore? Or was the phone no longer talking to a cell phone tower?
Well, there was no activity user initiated on the handset after that time.
Okay. And these are all the records. So the records actually stop as far as her use of the phone on 12/18 at 3:41.
Yes.
Okay. Now, even after you convert the phone records, tell me the last phone number that she called.
It was an outgoing call to the number here, 843-385-3175.
Okay. Now, so we can know how to do it. This is the direction whether she was calling out or it was calling her, correct?
Yes.
And this over here shows how long the two phones were connected.
For voice calls, yes.
Okay. Now, on voice calls, what was the last phone call that lasted more than a minute or two?
It'd been the call here on the 18th of December at 3:17 a.m. That call just over 4 minutes.
Okay. Now, what were the last two phone numbers she called?
The one I just previously read off, the number ending in 3175.
Okay.
And then there was an outgoing call to 843-444-2462.
Okay. Now, we see that number again up here at 12:18, 1:35 a.m. Is that right? That
Yes.
444 number?
Yes.
Now, have you viewed the records from July until December 18th?
Yes.
Did you ever in all those records see this phone number prior to December 18th at 1:35, 444-2462?
Not that I remember.
Okay. Now, did you see phone calls between her and 843-385-3175?
Yes.
And have you actually counted up the contact between her and that phone number?
Yes.
Okay. If you don't mind, Mr. Whitt, have a seat. Now, Mr. Whitt, I've got these phone records in numerical form to try to make it easier. Earlier, I asked you if she had contact with 444-2462.
Right.
And you said you didn't remember.
Not to my recollection.
Okay. Now, would you like to view the phone records to be sure whether or not she had ever had contact with that phone number before?
I could, yes.
Okay. And would you rather look at it in an electronic format or?
Electronic would be better.
Okay. Thank you.
Just trying to help them.
Sorry for the delay, Judge. You got it?
I think this one's not working.
Okay, you try to use,
I've got it.
okay.
Okay, now to repeat the question.
When did the phone number 843-444-2462 ever have contact with Heather's phone prior to the early morning hours of December 18th, 2013?
There was no other entries before that date.
I'm sorry?
There was no, the entry was Pacific time. There was a text 11:21 p.m. Pacific time, which would be 2:21 a.m. Eastern time.
And so when you converted the text message, on the record it shows December 17th, but it's really December 18th.
Right.
Okay. So when you look at the record, when is the first phone activity between that phone number and Heather Ellis?
There was an incoming call at 1:35 a.m. on the 18th.
Okay. So December 18th at 1:35 is the first time she ever has contact with this phone number?
During the time frame of these records, yes.
Okay. So from July until December?
From July 17th to the 18th of December.
Okay, that's the only first time she makes
We've
contact
asked
with
that
that.
question several times, let's move on. Thank you.
Now, let me ask you this, Mr. Witt, because I want to put it up on the board to keep our memory refreshed. What are the last two phone numbers Ms. Elvis reaches out to the early morning hours of December 18th? If you don't mind, just label the last two phone calls and put them on.
The last two numbers were 843-385-3175, and then 843-444-2462.
And we know there's no contact with the 444 number prior to December. Now, did you count up the amount of contact between her and the 3175 number?
Yes.
And I'm going to show you now what's been marked as State's Exhibit 7. Let me show it to Mr. Galmore real quick first. You got any objection? Okay. I want you to look at State's Exhibit number 7 and tell me if that information is accurate as to the phone calls between Heather and 3175.
Yes.
And is it also accurate as to any phone calls between Heather and the number 444-2462?
Yes.
Your Honor, this time the state wishes to place State's Exhibit 7 in evidence and publish it to the jury.
Any objections?
No, sir.
Without objection, state 7 is admitted and you may publish it.
Thank you, Your Honor.
That would be awesome. We've done the lights too low.
Mr. Wood, do you mind stepping down? That way you can look along with us from the TV. And these are the last two phone numbers you just testified that Heather made contact with. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you've looked at the contact in July between Ms. Elvis and the 3175 number, correct?
Yes.
So
Okay, if you don't mind, tell us.
Y'all switch sides, so Mr. Whitt, you're speaking
Sure.
back towards the vocal court.
Sure.
That will help her hear it. Thank you.
And I'm gonna give you this, Mr. West, so you can look along. If you don't mind, tell us in July about how much contact was between Heather and 3175.
There was a total of 411 contacts
Mm-hmm.
during that month between the number 3175 and the Heather's number.
Okay, and if you don't mind, how many times did she call that number?
There were calls going to that number, 198.
And how many times did she receive calls from that number, calls or text?
213.
Okay, and tell me about August.
In August, there were a total of 564
Okay,
activities between the two numbers,
okay, and how many times did she call that number?
213,
And how many times did that number reach out to her?
351,
Okay, and how about September?
you get a total of 558.
Okay, just for the month of September.
Yes.
And how many times did she reach out to that number?
208 times,
Okay, and how many times did that number contact her?
350,
Okay, and how about October?
total of 517,
Okay, and how many times did she contact that number?
199,
And how many times did that number contact her?
318,
Okay, and how about November?
total of 64.
Okay, so now we've had a drastic drop.
Yes.
How many times now has she contacted her?
24,
And how about that number contacting her?
40,
But the number is still contacting her more often, correct?
yes.
Okay. Now, how about December?
Just a total of 6,
Okay, so now we've had a drastic drop off.
yes.
And is that from her to 3175?
All 6.
Okay, and it never shows the person that this number belongs to reaching out to her on the phone records, correct?
Correct.
Okay, now, how about the 444 number?
From July to November, there was no contact
Okay,
between those two numbers.
now tell me about now December. No contact for July, August, September, October, 5 months. Now, how about December?
There were 10 contacts from Heather's number to that number, and then one from that number to Heather.
Okay, let me ask you this. In regards to this number, who initiated the first contact? Was it this number to Heather, or was it vice versa?
I'd have to look on the record to refresh. I didn't come
I
it up to
got it right
memory.
here, that's why we got it.
It was an incoming call to the Heather's number from that number.
Okay, from the 444-2462?
Yes,
So that number initiated the contact
yes,
first.
yes,
And in response, she contacts back 10 times
correct,
after never having contact with that number for 5 months.
correct.
Now, is this accurate as to the last page of her phone records?
Yes,
Okay, and again, this shows those two numbers are clearly the last two numbers.
yes,
Okay, and there's a drastic drop-off on the phone calls between 3175 and her in December, is that correct?
yes,
And then out of nowhere, all of a sudden, 444-2462 contacts her.
from the previous 5 months, yes,
Okay, so never had contacted her in the prior 5 months.
yes,
And she had not reached out to 3175 in the month of December until 12/18 at 3:16 a.m. Is that correct?
correct,
So for this entire month, all of a sudden, she had had no contact with these two numbers until the morning of December 18, 2013.
Correct.
No further questions, Mr. Whitt. If you don't mind, sit, have a seat. Let me put this, we will kind of get this back in order. Let me ask one more question. Do you mind? One more. Thank you, Jim. Mr. Whitt, when we just went through, and I'm going to give you this so you can have it referred to. This is State's Evidence 7, so I can identify it, what I'm giving you for the record. When we went through that, we see this drastic drop in November between her phone and 3175.
Correct.
Okay? In early November, when do you see kind of the last contact?
I have to look at the records.
Okay.
Yeah, I looked at this previously. There was a contact on the 5th of November.
Okay.
It was a text.
Okay.
And then the next contact was on the 15th of November, and that was it for November.
Okay. So there's some contact up to the 5th, the majority of it, and then there's 2 phone calls on the 15th, correct, for November? And then there's nothing until December 18th.
Correct.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Oh, you can vote.
Mr. Whitt, let me ask you about these charts you have here. I think you testified on direct examination that some columns were redacted.
Correct.
Okay. What does that mean?
Well, there's other columns, but they just show the main date, time, and calls and duration. And then they added in this column here, so to make it easy to understand the conversion for the text messages from Pacific to Eastern time.
Okay, so when you say redacted, are you saying there are other columns here?
Yes.
Okay, well, what's listed in the other columns that's not on this poster board?
You have information for the cell site, which is the location of the towers that registered with the handset. Those are what's not on those charts.
Okay. Is that the only thing that's not on the charts?
Yes.
And why did you choose to not include that information?
I didn't make the charts.
You didn't make, who made the charts?
Prosecution.
Would that be the same for this chart also, sir?
Yes, after the duration, then the same thing. Those ending columns are not there.
Okay, so there are columns over here that are missing.
Right.
And those columns contain the cell tower site location information?
Yes.
Now, you brought with you today the phone records and the text records for the 8152 number, correct?
Yeah, they're contained on the same report.
Right. Okay. Does T-Mobile keep records of internet searches?
So what?
Internet searches.
No.
Does T-Mobile keep records of Facebook activity?
No.
Does T-Mobile keep records of Snapchat activity?
No.
What about Instagram activity?
No.
Does T-Mobile keep records of pictures?
No.
So if I take a picture on a T-Mobile phone, you all don't have that in your computer?
The actual picture? No.
Phones can do these types of things. Phones can get on the internet, right?
Yes.
T-Mobile phones can get on the internet?
Yes.
T-Mobile phones can access Facebook?
Yes.
They can access Snapchat
Yes.
and Instagram.
Yes.
Is there any other information that T-Mobile collects that's not on these charts?
Not that I'm aware of.
Now, you testified about the number of telephone calls between the 8152 number and the 3175 number.
Yes.
And you went over that for several months from July to December.
Yes.
Are you able to tell us what other numbers the 8152 number was in contact with?
It's on the record, yes.
That's on the records, okay. So what you gave us was a snapshot that only included those two phones?
That's what was on the chart, correct?
Right, okay. But there are more records, they're just not in that particular exhibit.
Complete records in this exhibit.
Right.
Would you reference for the record,
I'm sorry.
please, what exhibit
Number.
you're referring to?
Number 3.
Number 3. Okay, thank you, sir.
Sorry.
Was T-Mobile asked to do a search of any other telephone numbers?
Not to my knowledge.
Were you all asked to do any research on any of the numbers that were listed on the 8152 records?
Not to my knowledge.
Does T-Mobile maintain social media information?
No.
If someone were to make a purchase on one of your phones, does T-Mobile keep records of that?
I'm not sure I can get my purchase.
I mean, as in Amazon Prime?
That would be part of the internet activity, which we don't track.
Okay. So if there was internet use, then you wouldn't know about it?
It would not be on our records.
All right. Now, you indicated that the last telephone number that Ms. Elvis called was the 3175 number, is that correct?
Correct.
Can you confirm whether or not that phone call was received?
It only shows that there was a connection.
It shows that it was a connection?
Yes.
Was that call a routed call?
No.
No, it was not. Did you have any routed calls on this list?
I did not notice our routing number on there, no.
All right. Now, as to the last telephone call on the list, I think you said that there was a connection. And can you explain for the jury the length of time for that connection?
0.03 minutes.
And how much time does that translate to in seconds? Do you know?
Just a couple seconds.
And before that, there's another call to that same number, and the duration would be the same, 0.03?
Correct.
In fact, there are several calls with a 0.03 duration.
Correct.
What does that indicate to you, sir?
There was a connection for that short period of time to that number.
Do you think a conversation took place in 0.03 seconds?
Again, all I can tell from the records is that there was a connection to that number for that time frame, for the time shown on the records.
You haven't given us any information about cell phone towers, that's correct?
I have not been asked so far.
Okay. Can you tell us what determines how a phone decides what tower to use?
Your phone searches and looks for the best signal, and it's known as camping. It camps on that signal, and then it will also, your phone will know, or the tower will know what's called the neighbor list. In other words, other sites that you're within range of, and you may not have the best signal, but you're still able to connect to. So once that call connects, and for these records only, voice call shows cell sites, and then you register that cell site at the initiation of the call.
Now, if I wanted to use a T-Mobile phone to get on the internet, does that also go through a cell site, a cell tower?
It could.
But you don't have any records of that?
But they don't, if you connect for internet activity, that does not show on these records.
So you could not tell us if Miss Elvis was on the internet?
No.
You received a subpoena from the Horry County Police Department, is that correct? For these records for
Yes.
for the 8152 number?
Yes.
Did you receive any other subpoenas from the Horry County Police Department or just the one?
Nothing I'm aware of.
Okay. Were there any other subpoenas from any other law enforcement agencies regarding that telephone number?
Not that I'm aware of.
So the state law enforcement division, SLED, they did not subpoena telephone records from?
Again, I don't have knowledge of that.
Okay. So if there were any, I think they call them memes?
Means?
Yes, your records don't show those.
Well, if you send something as part of a text, it's going to show the text on the records. It does not show content.
Okay. And you can't tell us, as far as content, conversation.
No, just that the text was sent or received.
Right, so T-Mobile doesn't like record telephone conversations somewhere. Okay. So there is no record of any telephone conversations between Miss Elvis and anyone?
No.
Y'all just don't record that
Oops,
information?
I didn't hear all those questions.
I'm sorry. I said you don't record that. T-Mobile does not save that data.
No.
Court's indulgence, Your Honor.
Certainly.
Let me very briefly ask you about this chart. This is State's Exhibit number 6 one more time. Tell us when was the first contact from the 444 telephone number?
At 01:35 a.m. on the 18th?
That would be this first one?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the next number that is indicated is a 609 number.
Yes.
Can you tell us the time for that telephone call?
At 1:44 a.m.
All right, so that would be 11 minutes difference between those two calls?
Yes.
Okay, so whatever happened, she receives a phone call here, there's an 11-minute delay, and then she makes a phone call here.
Well, 11 minutes between the time. She was on that first call for almost 5 minutes.
Right. And then the next phone call is made 11 minutes after the first phone call is received.
Yes.
All right. You don't have any further questions. Thank you, sir.
Read right.
Just a couple, Your Honor.
Okay.
Mr. Whitt, Mr. Galmore asked you some questions about this column here, about the duration. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And you told him that this column here represents how long the connection time is between Heather's phone and whatever the other phone number is, correct?
Yes.
And he was asking you about how long did these phone calls last, correct?
Yes.
Can you look, and I'm going to use the other one because it shows the text messages and the converted time, shows more accurate what's going on with her phone here in Horry County. Tell this jury what two phone numbers she had the longest connection time with the early morning hours of December 18, 2014.
The two longest calls, last was 3:17 a.m. to for 4.15 minutes to the number ending in 3175. And then the other was for the number ending in 2462, called 4.83 minutes at 1:35 a.m. on the 18th.
Okay, so she had the longest connection time with the same 2 phone numbers. They were the last 2 numbers she called that night.
Yes.
And so there's no doubt she was connected to 444-2462 for at least 4 minutes.
Yes.
And the number ended in 3175, at least 4 minutes.
Yes.
And those were the longest 2 calls the morning of December 18th.
Cumulative, she's already passed that.
Just last one time.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Recross.
No, further.
Thank you, sir. You may step down. You wish this witness to be excused?
Please, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No, sir.
You're free to leave, Mr. Whitt. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, I appreciate you coming.
Call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. This time, the state would call Mr. Stephen Schiraldi.
Okay.
Raise your right hand, place your left hand on the Bible. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give the court in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God? Yes. Thank you. Please be seated. Your step. Speaking to the microphone, state your full name and spell your last name.
Stefano Schiraldi, Schiraldi.
Mr. Schiraldi, where do you currently live, sir?
In Chicago,
And how long have you lived in Chicago?
almost 5 years.
Do you have any family in Chicago?
2 brothers
And where did you live prior to Chicago?
in Merle's Inlet.
And how long did you live in Merle's Inlet?
Around 7 years.
Did you go to school here?
Yes, I graduated from St. James High School.
Well, how old are you?
26.
Did you have family when you lived here?
Yes.
Did they live here is what I mean.
Yes.
And who was that?
My mom and my younger brother.
Now, is that who you were living with when you lived in Merle's Inlet?
Yes.
Okay. So, you were living here back in December of 2013?
Yes,
Were you working?
I was.
Do you remember how far you were in school back in December of 2013, where you were in school?
I was graduated from high school in 2013 and I did not go to college.
All right. Where were you working back in 2013?
I was a line cook for Wicked Tuna in Merle's Inlet.
All right, so you lived and worked in Merle's Inlet.
Yes.
What kind of restaurant is Wicked Tuna?
It's an upscale seafood and sushi restaurant.
And what was your job at Wicked Tuna?
I worked on the saute station, making all the daily specials.
How long did you work there?
A few years. I worked for the company at multiple restaurants.
Fair enough. So when you were living in Merle's Inlet and working at Wicked Tuna, did you ever know Heather Ellis?
I knew her as an acquaintance from high school.
So y'all went to school together at St. James.
Yes.
Was she in the same grade as you?
I believe she was at least 1 grade below me.
Were y'all close in high school?
Not at all.
No. Okay. And after you graduated, did you maintain contact with her?
No,
Okay. Because y'all weren't really friends, so to speak, in high school, right?
just acquaintances.
Just a question. After you graduated, did you have an opportunity to come back in contact with Heather Ellis?
Not previously before 2013.
Okay. So how long after you graduated was it before you had contact again with Heather?
Roughly 3 years.
Oh, wow. So let me ask you this. How, after 3 years, if you didn't know Heather in school, did you come to contact her again or her to contact you again?
We followed each other on social media, and I commented on a post that she made on Instagram, and she replied.
Do you remember what the comment was?
I don't.
Okay. So that initiated, that comment initiated kind of a reunion, for lack of a better term, between you and a former classmate?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about that reunion. What came of that?
It was pretty brief. We chatted, and I ended up asking her if I could take her out to dinner, and she reciprocated, so we made plans for later in the week.
But you had never taken her out before?
No.
Okay. Do you remember when this dinner date was scheduled for?
I don't remember the day of the week, but I believe it was December 17th.
Okay. So, but you do know it was right up until the time she disappeared?
Correct.
Close in time?
Yes.
Okay. Did you actually get to take her out?
I did.
Tell me about that date.
It was pretty nice. I picked her up from her apartment building around 7 p.m. and we drove to Bandidos, which is a Mexican restaurant on Ocean Boulevard on the water. It was later in the evening, so we had the restaurant mostly to ourselves, so we had some nice quiet conversation all night. And when we left there, we drove south down towards the Merle's Inlet Mall. And while we were there, I taught her how to drive a manual transmission because my truck at the time was manual, and she had expressed interest in wanting to learn.
All right, well, let's back up a little bit. So you picked her up at her place?
Yes.
Do you remember where she lived?
Off of 501 and near a golf course, kind of by where the Bob Evans used to be.
And you picked her up, you said, in your vehicle?
Yes.
What kind of vehicle was that?
It was a 1998 Ford Ranger.
Do you still have it?
No,
Okay. Is a Ford Ranger a big truck?
it's a very small truck.
Do you know a little bit about trucks?
Yes.
You know what a F-150 looks like?
Yes.
Compared to a F-150, tell me how a Ford Ranger compares.
Maybe a little bit less than half the size.
Oh, wow, so it's significantly smaller than an F-150.
It can depend on range, single cab, extended cab, and the size of bed, but generally speaking, yes.
Now, was your Ford Ranger a big jacked up Ford Ranger like my buddies drove in high school?
No, it was actually lower to the ground.
Oh, okay. Was it two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive?
Two-wheel drive?
You said it was a manual transmission.
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember about what time you picked Heather up?
I believe it was around 7 p.m.
Was it still daylight outside?
I think so.
Okay. When you went to Bandidos, is Bandidos still there?
I'm not sure. I haven't been down that way in quite a while.
When you went to Bandidos, Mexican restaurant, right? How long did y'all stay at Bandidos?
Approximately an hour and a half.
Okay. And obviously you had dinner.
Right.
Do you remember whose idea was initially to go on the date?
It was mine.
Okay. Now, when you went to pick her up, the first stop you made was the restaurant?
Yes.
After you left the restaurant, where did you and Heather go?
We went to the Merle's Inlet Square Mall.
About what time was this?
I would say we arrived there around 10:30. When we left Bandidos, they were closing up. It was the end of their night.
Well, the mall closed around 10:30?
Yes, the parking lot was empty.
Well, why'd you go to the mall if it's closed?
We were driving around looking at Christmas lights because it was the holiday season, and she had expressed interest in learning to drive the manual transmission, so we stopped there for that purpose.
So you were teaching her to drive the stick?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember what year your truck was? Did you tell me?
It's a 1998.
I'm gonna back up one more time. When you went to her apartment to pick her up earlier that night, around 7, you say, did you see anything suspicious?
No, everything looked pretty ordinary.
Okay. Did you go in?
No.
She came out to your truck?
She met me at the door.
Okay. Did you happen to see her car?
I don't recall.
You don't recall? Okay, that's fair. How many doors did your truck have?
2.
What color was your truck?
Grayish blue.
You said there was no, did you tell me if there was a toolbox on the back of that truck?
No toolbox.
All right. Do you remember how old Heather was at this time?
I don't remember. Under 21.
How old were you?
I believe 22.
So you were of age, well, you were old enough to drink, she was not.
Right.
Let me ask you this, when you went to Bandidos and you had dinner, Was alcohol involved?
Not at all.
Did you have anything to drink?
I still don't drink to this day.
Did Heather have anything to drink?
No.
Okay. How long did you stay at the mall parking lot teaching Heather to drive?
I'm not sure. Maybe an hour?
Did she learn to drive it?
Yeah, she actually did very well.
Well, what kind of mood was she in? Was she sad?
No, she seemed pretty chipper. She was upbeat.
She didn't act scared?
No,
Did y'all argue about anything?
not at all.
Okay. So she seemed like she was having a good time to you.
Yes.
After you left the mall parking lot, did you go anywhere else?
Yes, from there we went back to where I was living at the time, at my mom's house, and we watched a movie.
Tell me where your mom lived.
She lives in Merle's Inlet off of McDowell Shortcut Road.
And that's where you went.
Yes.
Was anybody there when you got there?
I believe my mom might have been there, but I don't think I saw her. I'm pretty sure she was asleep.
What movie did you watch?
I don't remember.
That's fair. It's been 6 years, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember about how long you stayed at your house?
2 hours or so. Long enough to watch a movie.
During that whole 2 hours, did you talk to anybody else in the house? Did you talk to your mom?
No.
Okay. But you said you think your mom was home.
I think that she may have been home, yes.
Do you remember where your mom worked at that time?
She's a customer service manager at Walmart, I believe.
And she had that job back in 2013?
Yes. She's been with that store since they opened.
You may or may not know this, but do you know about what time she got off normally at night?
I'm not sure.
So you and Heather stay at your house for 2 hours and you just watch a movie?
Right.
Anything else go on?
Nope.
Anything romantic?
Nope.
I know I'm prying, but I gotta ask.
I understand. Nothing.
Fair enough. At the end of the 2 hours, tell me about what time it is now.
Oh, it was probably a little after 12:30, creeping on 1 o'clock, I would say.
What did you do after y'all got done watching the movie? Where did you watch the movie specifically in the house?
We were in my bedroom.
Was the door open or closed?
It was open.
Where is your bedroom in your house in relation to your mother's bedroom?
It's kind of diagonal across the hallway.
Is it a particularly big house?
A small 4-bedroom, single-family home.
1 story, 2?
2 stories.
Is your bedroom on the first floor or the second?
Second floor?
And your mom's is too?
Yes.
Okay. After you left your house, where did you and Heather go?
After we left, I took Heather back to her apartment.
Okay, and that was back off of 501.
Yes.
Do you remember how long it took you to get from your house to Heather's house?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Approximately 20 minutes. It's pretty late. It's not too far from where I was living at the time.
Okay. When you get to Heather's house, tell me what happens.
When we got there, I walked her to the door, and she invited me in. She just gave me a brief tour around her apartment, like, hey, this is where I live. It was pretty late, and I had to work in the morning, so I made my way back to the door, and we shared a kiss before I left.
So she did invite you in the house.
Yes.
Was anybody else in the house?
Not that I saw.
Tell me about the house. What kind of house was it?
It was an apartment building. I'm not sure how many bedrooms. I didn't make it past the kitchen living room area. It was pretty messy though.
It was a messy house?
Clothes and bottles and things like that all over the place.
So it was not a well-kept house?
No,
Could you tell that more than one person lived there?
definitely.
Okay. What makes you say that?
Just by the amount of things that were all over the place.
So how long did you stay in the house? Tell me that again.
Less than 10 minutes.
And nothing romantic happened in the house?
No, when we kissed it was outside of her door.
And what happened after the kiss?
After we kissed, I got back in my truck and I drove back home and went to sleep.
About how long total, Stephen, do you think you were gone from the time you left your house with Heather to take her home and come back home?
I would say less than an hour.
When you got back home, was anybody home?
I'm not sure.
You didn't see anybody?
No.
Is it common that if you are home, you don't know if your mom's there or not, or vice versa?
Right,
Okay, so it's possible for you to be home and not see her, and her to be home and not see you.
very correct.
When you dropped Heather off, how was she?
She seemed pretty satisfied with the way the evening went. We made plans to hang out the next day.
So you had intentions to go on a second date.
Yes,
Did you plan on keeping those intentions?
I did.
Was it your impression she did as well?
Yes.
Did you make the plans for the second date before or after the kiss?
I believe it was before.
Okay. When you got home, tell me what you did, Steve.
When I got home, I sent her a message to let her know that I arrived, and we chatted briefly before she stopped responding, and I eventually fell asleep.
What do you mean you sent her a message?
Just like a, hey, I just made it home.
I mean, was it a Facebook message?
Text message.
Text message. So you texted her when you got home.
Yes.
Did she respond?
Yes.
Did the response that she sent to you indicate to you that there was any distress?
Objection.
No.
Objections to hearsay between the, trying to get in communication from the victim and him by couching it in the term of text messages. I mean, we can deal with the records.
I'll allow the question is responding to the present sense impression of it. I'll allow that, no rule that basis.
Stephen, after you dropped Heather off and got home, you texted her, you said, did you go anywhere else that night?
No.
When's the next time you left your mom's house?
For work the next morning.
At Wickatoon.
Right.
Let me ask you this. When you were with Heather that night, do you remember her ever receiving any telephone calls during the course of the day?
No.
You don't remember, or she definitely did?
I don't remember.
Fair enough. Do you remember if she ever called anyone during the course of the day?
Not that I could see.
So if she did, it wasn't in your presence?
Correct.
This may be redundant, but I'm going to ask it. Do you remember if she ever had a phone conversation for 4 minutes while you were on the date?
Not that I saw, but she did use the restroom while we were watching a movie.
How long, do you remember how long she was going to the restroom?
I don't know.
So if she talked on the phone for 4 to 5 minutes, it would have been outside your presence or after you dropped her off?
Correct.
Of course, indulgent. Stephen, I'm now showing you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 8. I want you to take a look at that for me. Do you recognize that photograph?
I do.
Tell this jury what that is a photograph of.
This is a picture that I took of Heather while she was driving my truck in the mall parking lot.
When?
On the night that we went on a date.
The 17th of December?
Yes.
2013?
Yes.
Is that substantially how she appeared that night?
Yeah, it's a pretty accurate representation.
Has it been tampered with in any way since you took it?
No.
Your Honor, at this time I would tender State's 8 in the evidence.
Objection.
No objection.
Without objection, State's 8 is submitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Permission to publish.
You may proceed.
Stephen, I got one last question for you. Do you remember the phone number you had back in 2013?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to ask Ms. Miller to write this for me because I have right here horrible handwriting. Give me 1 second, Steve. All right, go ahead, my friend. What was your number back in 2013?
443.
Is that 843?
443.
443.
624. 6288.
So when you got home that night, the only way you communicated with Heather was via text.
Yes.
So on your phone records or on Heather's phone records, there would not be a telephone call, a voice call to your number or from her number.
No.
There wouldn't be a voice call from your number to her number.
No.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask Mr. Schiraldi if he can step down for a minute, just initial beside his number to validate that that is in fact his number, if you don't mind.
They step down.
Mr. Schiraldi, I want you to look at that number. And if that was your number back in 2013, put your initials right there for me, sir. Mr. Schiraldi, I'm also showing you what's been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 5. And this is already in evidence, so I want you to look at this board, okay? And I want you to look over here and tell me if you see your number from 2013 anywhere on this board.
Yes.
You do.
Speak up, please. So the court will better.
Apologies.
That's all right.
Yes, I do see my phone number.
Here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to take that same magic marker and write your name beside that number, if you don't mind, out here to the right. And I'll hold it for you. All right. Put your last initial right there for me, if you don't mind. All right. We'll take that. Thank you very much. And Your Honor, I'd like to note that Mr. Schiraldi has indicated his number is an incoming call from Heather Elvis's number at 2:24:17 a.m. A text message, I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. While we're doing that, ladies and gentlemen, it's not uncommon to pass an exhibit, but know that any exhibit that's been introduced will accompany you to the hearing, so you can study it in depth if you need to at that time.
And again, my attention's on States 5. So Stephen, you're saying this is your number right here, this 443,
Yes,
ending in 6288.
correct.
The next number is also 443-6288, right?
Yes,
How about the next one?
yes,
The one after that?
yes,
The one after that?
yes.
Where's the next time your number appears, Stephen?
At 2:34 a.m.,
How about after that?
2:35, and at 2:40, and then 2:42.
Now, would that be when you were communicating with her when you got home?
Yes,
After that time, and after those text messages, and we know those are text messages because they're indicated, after those text messages, do you see your number appear anywhere on this board under that?
no,
After that time?
No.
At 2:42?
no,
Do you recognize the numbers that come after your number?
no,
How about 3175?
no,
How about this 444 number?
no,
You don't know those numbers,
no, sir,
and you don't know who those belong to back in 2013.
no idea.
What's your note, John? Nothing further right now.
Very well, we can cross-examine. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Well, my understanding is you spoke with Detectives Lint and Hardy back on December 19th of 2013. Is that correct?
I don't recall the names, but I did have two detectives come and interview me while I was at work.
Okay, that's when they came at your shift there at the Whitt Stefano, is that right?
That's right.
Did they give you any call or any heads up that they might be coming, or did they just kind of show up?
I don't remember getting a call from them, but I remember my mom reaching out to my job saying that there were two detectives there looking for me and that she sent them my way.
Okay, all right. And since that time, you've spoken with investigators working for the solicitor's office, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You remember how many times you've had those communications?
I don't remember, but it was pretty frequently.
Okay. But all the statements that you, or the information you provided to police back in 2013 and any of those subsequent conversations with solicitor investigations have been complete and truthful, correct?
To the best of my knowledge.
Sure, absolutely. Whenever you first spoke to Detectives Hardy and Lint on the 19th, was your memory fresh as to the timeline of the date?
I would assume so.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask is, if I understand your testimony now, it is that you dropped Heather off somewhere shortly after 1 a.m. at her apartment. Is that accurate?
I'm not sure at the time.
You don't know the time when you...
Not exactly, no.
Okay. Are you able to, within an hour range, give us an idea on when you would have dropped her off at her house?
It would have probably been sometime between 1:45 and 2:15.
Between 1:45 and 2:50?
2:15.
2:15, okay. All right. If you would have told Detectives Hardy and Lynn that you thought it was about 3 a.m. whenever you dropped her off, do you recall saying that?
I don't recall saying
You
that.
don't recall saying that, all right. But had you done that, based on what you've reviewed since then, that would seem to be inaccurate, correct?
Correct. If I did say that, it was probably a rough guesstimation because I wasn't tracking the time at the moment.
And you were not expecting to speak with him at that time, right?
Right.
Now, what social media platforms were you and Heather connected?
We were following each other on Instagram. I'm not sure of any others.
Okay. To your knowledge, did she have any other social media accounts, Twitter, for example?
I'm not on Twitter, so I'm not sure.
Okay. In the year since, have you come to learn one way or another as to whether or not she had any Twitter accounts?
I believe she had a Facebook account, but I'm still not sure about Twitter.
Okay. How about Snapchat?
I'm not sure.
You don't know one way or another?
No.
Okay. And how did you reach out to her that night via a message on Instagram? Is that correct?
It was a comment on one of her pictures.
Okay. But you utilized the social media platform in order to initiate the conversation with her, correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, at that point, what prompted you at that particular moment to initiate that interaction with her?
I'm honestly not sure. I would have to see the picture or the comment to be able to recall.
Did you have any knowledge at that time as to her relationship status, one way or another?
No.
Okay. So if I told you she'd been, well, let me ask you this, to draw that question. Did you have any knowledge as to whether or not she'd been living with any other man in the preceding month or two?
I had no idea.
You had no knowledge one way or another?
None whatsoever.
Okay. In the 6 years or so since this has happened, have you now come to learn of any information regarding a relationship of Heather Elvis during that time period?
Yes.
Okay. Did that involve a man named Jeremy Fleming?
No, I've actually never heard that name before.
Not heard of a Jeremy Fleming?
No, the only name that I've heard in relationship to Heather Elvis as far as a romantic relationship during that time frame would have been Sidney Moore.
Okay. And we talked to, did she mention Sidney Moore's name at any point during this date that you and her were on?
No.
Okay. And whenever you went to the apartment, did you have any information regarding how long Heather had been living at the apartment?
No, I don't think so.
She didn't tell you one way or another?
No.
Was it your understanding, well, let me back up, was this a one-bedroom or two-bedroom apartment?
I'm not sure. Like I said previously, I didn't make it past the kitchen living room area.
Okay. Was it your understanding that she shared the apartment with another individual?
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned whenever you went inside that you saw bottles and clothes and all other kind of stuff. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Were any of those bottles, were they alcohol bottles?
I don't think so. It seemed like 2 liters of like soda, tea, milk, things like that.
Okay. So you didn't observe any bottles of alcohol or anything laying around?
No.
Okay. All right. Now, did she ever indicate to you or talk to you about having where she'd been living prior to that apartment that you took her home to?
No, it didn't come up.
Okay. All right. Now, you said you picked her up at her house at around 7, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And we now believe that you drove her back at approximate somewhere between 2:45 and 3:15, excuse me, 2:45 and 2:15 a.m.?
Approximately.
Okay. All right. And you went inside just briefly, correct?
Correct.
Did you ever sit down on the couch?
No.
Were you ever asked by investigators whether or not you had sat down on the couch?
No.
Were you ever asked by investigators if you had ever gone into one of the bedrooms?
No.
Investigators never asked you that?
Not that I remember.
Okay. Did the police ask you if you and her had sex that night?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And let me ask you this. Whenever you're speaking to police on, I guess it was December 19th, safe to say you were the last known person to have seen Heather live, correct?
I have no idea.
At that point?
I have no idea.
Okay. Now, when you gave that interview, were you asked to provide a DNA sample?
I don't recall.
You don't recall if you were asked to provide a DNA sample?
No, I don't recall.
Do you know if any subsequent encounters with law enforcement, if you've been asked to provide a DNA sample?
I don't recall.
How about a fingerprint?
I don't recall.
Let me ask you this, did the police ever ask to inspect your vehicle?
No.
Did the police ever ask to go to the house that you shared with your mother and perform any type of inspection or review of that bedroom at that house?
No.
Now, you said whenever you came home, you didn't have direct contact with your mother, correct?
That's correct.
All right. So it's safe to say in terms of eyewitnesses, there's no one that would have been able to corroborate the fact that you arrived home during this time frame that you told police back in December.
As far as I know.
All right. Now, you also said that I believe police had talked to your mother prior to talking to you. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know whether or not she knew the substance of what the police were looking to speak to you about?
No, when she contacted me at work, she seemed pretty concerned and worried. She had no idea what was going on.
Okay. But she knew it was the police, correct?
Mm-hmm.
She knew it involved a
Yes.
she knew it involved a missing girl, correct?
At the time, I'm not sure. Potentially after the interview, once I had face time with her, I'm sure I would have filled her in, but at the time, I don't know how much she knew about the situation.
Okay. And she knew that the subject of that investigation would have been the girl that you had gone out with the previous night. Is that correct?
I would presume so.
Okay. All right. Now, during the course of your date, did you and her ever discuss any pregnancy or anticipated pregnancy of Miss Elvis?
No.
Did you make any modifications to this Ford Ranger after having missed?
After she went missing, no.
Come on, John.
Sir?
Mr. Schiraldi, did police take possession of your cell phone?
Yes, I gave it to them voluntarily.
You did give that to them? Okay. Nothing further for this witness, Sean.
Redirect.
Very briefly, Judge.
Sure.
Stephen, you just testified as to your interaction with law enforcement. You gave them your cell phone, you said, right?
Yes.
Did they have to serve you with a search warrant to give them that cell phone up?
No. Following my interview at my job, when my shift ended, I drove to a precinct in Conway where I voluntarily gave them my phone and let them take any information off of it that they wanted or needed.
Why'd you do that?
Because I wanted to be as helpful as possible.
Had they asked you for a DNA sample, would you have given it?
Yes,
Had they asked you for a fingerprint sample, would you have given it?
absolutely.
Had they asked you to seize your truck and search it, would you have let them?
Without any hesitation.
Were the same answers you've given here today consistent with what you told law enforcement in the past?
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Recross. Michelle.
Very briefly.
Sure.
Mr. Schiraldi, you had that initial conversation we talked about on the 19th, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then you went to the Conway precinct, correct? You gave them your phone?
Correct.
Okay. And again, at that time, with you being there, with you being in the police building, again, there was no request for a hair follicle or fingerprints or DNA or any of those type of things at that time, correct?
Correct.
Sorry, no further questions.
All right. You wish the witness to be excused, Mr. Hill? Please, Your Honor. Any objection?
No.
You're free to step down, free to leave, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, we'll take a recess. We let you go to your jury room for about 10 or 15 minutes. Do not begin today. Don't discuss the case.